All right, everyone, and we are live. Welcome to our first episode of KC Reacts. I'm Kevin Hammer,
I'm Chris Barrett.
and we thank you so very much for joining us. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share, no matter where you're watching this from, whether it be YouTube or Facebook. And on that, this first episode of ours is called Do You Hear Her Roar? All right, what we're going to be going over is women and whether or not they actually belong in fields such as law enforcement and as firefighters. So, this is going to be an interesting discussion. But we have a few clips to respond to first, and then we'll dive right into a deeper discussion. So, please feel free, if you wish, to contribute to the conversation. I know that we'd love to have your input. And if you feel comfortable, we might even bring your comment up on the screen. So just let us know if that's something you'd like to see. All right, so with that, we're going to play this first clip and then dive right in. So as we all know what happened with the LA fires, there's been a great discussion around DEI when it comes to the position of firefighter, and specifically whether or not women are appropriate when it comes to filling that role of firefighter. So here we go. We have a few clips from LA's finest when it comes to firefighters. All right.
You want to see somebody that responds to your house, your emergency, whether it's a medical call or a fire call, that looks like you. It gives that person a little bit more ease, knowing that somebody might understand their situation better.
All right, so that was a quick clip there. Chris, what do you have to say about that? About, that if you're on fire, that you want to see someone who looks like you.
Or maybe has my same sexual orientation or desire to eat lobster, I mean, what the F? I mean, I don't give a damn what the person looks like, what their background is. I mean, hell, if they're there to save me, they can be the most conservative, gay-hating Christian, but as long as they care enough to save my butt when I'm in a situation like that, I don't care who they are. I don't need a gay person to come save me. I don't need a brown person to come save me, bi person, or whatever identity that you want to go with. It's just ridiculous.
All right, so here's my take on this, right? Here's how I look at it when it comes to this. I am just under 5'8", right? I am out of shape, and I am pudgy. So no, I do not want to see someone who looks like me coming to my rescue in an emergency situation. I'm going to be honest, all right?
Neither do I, Kevin. I don't
want to see a Hulk of a man, all right? I want to see a Hulk of a man. I want to see a man who looks like he can pick me up, throw me over one shoulder, and while on his way out of the fire, he grabs someone else, throws them over his other shoulder, and carries us both to safety. So no, I do not want to see someone who looks like me when I'm in an emergency situation. All right? I just don't, especially if I'm trapped in a fire. Now, speaking of men trapped in fires, that brings us to our next clip with this same lovely individual.
She's strong enough to do this, or you couldn't carry my husband out of a fire, which my response is, he got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire.
Isn't that cool how it's like the victim's fault, I mean, it's like chances are, I mean, I'm just, I'm this woman. I don't mean just a woman because that's insulting, but I mean, I'm just this woman who wants to be a firefighter, and because I probably can't do what all the other male firefighters do, because I mean, let's look at her. I mean, hello. She is not at the peak of health. Neither am I. So I'm not, saying something that, just to be mean. But the thing is she, probably couldn't carry that man out. So her excuse for not being able to do that is to essentially blame the victim. I mean, that's what's truly going on there. And that's ridiculous to suggest that, well, because I can't carry a man out, and let's face it, I mean, men way more tend to be more muscular, all that type of stuff. She probably can't carry a man out. But sometimes, Kevin, I just can't with these people.
So this video, right? Well, it's funny because this video got a lot of hate in regards to this specific response. But to a degree, I'm going to be honest. I actually have respect for this woke feminist for being honest, right? You rarely see that. We have an honest woke feminist here. Like, oh my goodness, mark the date on the damn calendar. Because first of all, right, she's acknowledging that she wouldn't be able to carry a man out of the fire. So you got to give her credit there, right? She is absolutely acknowledging the reality there. And then in true feminist format, of course, she's blaming the man for getting himself in a situation, right? In true feminist fashion, this woman is blaming a man for being in trouble. So my take personally is I'll give this woman credit. At least she's being 100% honest when it comes to how she's expressing herself. So bravo there. And as you see on the screen there, it says only about 5% of working firefighters. It does say that only about 5% of working firefighters are women. That is the full. I did cut it off a little bit before the last part popped in. I'm not gonna lie, and we'll get into this more. I personally think that's a bit too much, but we'll definitely get there.
Well, let's put it this way: it's 5% for a reason. Duh. But anyway, yeah,
exactly.
Let's go on.
So we'll get back to this individual in our more broader conversation, but we're also going to move on because this next video is actually very interesting because someone who's a friend on my social media actually posted this video with the intent to prove that, look, women can do what men can do, especially when it comes to being a firefighter. And the irony is, in my opinion, he actually proved quite the opposite. Now, when you're watching this video, it's a woman carrying a man. I want you to pay attention to the body language. What is it telling you? Is this woman carrying this man in a fashion that she feels comfortable, secure, and confident? So here we go. Let's get to that clip. All right. So, Chris, I'm going to let you have that first reaction to this one. What's your quick take on that?
Well, I mean, it doesn't look like she's struggling terribly. But yeah, and we'll probably get into this more a little bit later on once we get past the clips and everything. But this is not to say that not all women can't do this job. It's just, I think it's just being realistic and acknowledging that most women probably can't do this job. So, I mean, she's obviously able to carry the man. Is she probably, I mean, she's walking kind of slow, in my opinion. So, you're probably not going to be walking at that pace when you're trying to carry someone out of a fire. You're probably going to be trying to run a little bit. So, but at the same time, when I first saw this, I was like, okay, she looks like she's struggling a little bit, but she might be a woman who at least can perform reasonably well. That is my take.
Absolutely. And, just so our audience can get an honest perspective on this, I'm going to play this quickly one more time, and then I'm going to give my response, just because I do want everyone to be like, okay, because I also started a few seconds later.
Oh, yeah, because I didn't see this part.
Yeah.
Before you give your response, Kevin, I do have to ask. Um, was she supposed to be walking so slowly? Do you know?
So the full context behind this clip, I'm actually not familiar with that specifically. I just have this video clip and then the following one for us to respond to, which the next video clip is actually the man carrying her, and you are going to see a difference.
Sure.
So I don't have the full context there. Now, I assume it's a matter of carrying someone in a fashion that's safe, right? And
Right.
somewhat a timely manner. I assume that that is ultimately the goal that we're seeking here when it comes to this exercise. Now, I want to start off by saying that this woman is unquestionably fit, right? My asthmatic butt, I'm sure she could outdo me in a number of ways, running, all that stuff. So I'm not here to attack her in that sense. She is unquestionably physically fit. However, when I watch this video, granted it's not a large struggling, but I do see a little bit of struggling in her initial movements and her later movements. Just by the way her hips and legs are moving, I see a little bit shaking going on. But overall, to her credit, she manages to carry him, and you know what? I gotta respect that. I definitely gotta give her my respects for that. However, I do have the clip of the man carrying her, and that is the one we're going to watch next. So, ladies and gentlemen out there, let us know what you think. Here's the clip, the next clip. Now, Chris, like I said, again, all due respect to this woman's strength because she is fit. All respects to her. I mean, she has a great deal to be proud of here. I'm not arguing that she doesn't. However, would you say there's a noticeable difference there?
Just a bit. A little tiny one. It actually kind of gets, well, again, to her credit, like I said, I mean, she might be able to perform the job reasonably well, but, the thing is I just want to make sure, and we'll get, like I said, I know we'll get to it later, but I just want to make sure that the standards are equal across the board, but this actually gets to the point that I made earlier, that if somebody is carrying your butt out of a burning building, you want them to be going at a faster pace than a slow walk, which is what the woman was doing. The woman was walking very slow. I see, and because I didn't know the larger context, that really stood out to me how slowly she was moving. This guy is practically sprinting, and carrying her. So, I mean, if I'm going to choose between the slow walking woman carrying me out of the burning building or the guy who can pick my fat butt up and, actually get me out at a decent pace, I'm sorry, I kind of want the dude.
And I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be honest with all due respects to her. Out of these two options, if I'm trapped in a fire and one of these individuals has to come in and pick me up and carry me out, I'm going to want it to be him. From what I've seen here, I am going to want it to be him. Again, no disrespect to her. I have absolute respect for her and her level of fitness. I mean, clearly, she's worked hard and she deserves that, for that to be acknowledged, that she's worked so hard to get to where she is. I'm not making light of that at all.
Right.
So full props to her. But at the end of the day, when I'm looking at these two videos and I'm going to have to choose, I'm going to choose this man when it comes to rescuing me and carrying me out of a fire. So there are some, just to say, we do have some questions in the comments there. my good friend Vinny, who's a regular, watching when I stream. He is commenting on YouTube. Hello, Vinny. He's actually asking, do they weigh the same? To be honest, I don't have their weights. I mean, that is a good question. However, it's clear he has more muscle definition. So, as we know, muscle tends to be heavier. So I'd assume that if these two individuals were to get on a scale next to each other, he'd probably weigh more than her.
I would agree with that, Kevin, because I mean, honestly, they look like they're about the same height.
Yeah.
But generally men tend to weigh more than women. So, I mean, maybe that was a little bit harder for her in that regard. So, I mean, that is something to take into account, because she was probably carrying someone who weighed more than she did. But still, at the same time, I mean, he probably doesn't weigh that much more than she does. I mean, I think that's kind of my point. It's like maybe he weighs 15, 20 pounds more than she does, but that's probably about it. And so 15 to 20 pounds, I mean, I can pick up 15 or 20 pounds, and it's no big freaking deal. So I mean, honestly, still it is concerning that she walked so slowly, but he was able to just right down that track.
Yeah, and I stand by that as well. As we've said, we have no disrespect whatever for this woman. We both consider her fit and accomplished, but at the end of the day, if we're looking at these two individuals when it comes to being trapped in a fire, an emergency situation, I think we both agreed that we'd want the man there to be the one to carry us out of that situation overall. So with that in mind, we're going to move on to our next video. Now keep in mind, we're going to come back to this because we're going to have a broader discussion about this. This video clip is a little bit more of a comedy, right? This is two women who are in law enforcement, and they are trying to apprehend a suspect. I do not have the full context for this video clip. I tried looking it up. In the short time I had, I did not find further context beyond what's in this clip. However, I do feel that this clip is a bit telling, but we'll let you decide. All right, here we go.
What the fuck, monsieur? Oui. Oui. Oh. Gado. Oh, monsieur est gone. Oh, lui est mort. Monsieur est gone. Oh. Get him back.
All right. Well, okay. I need to give some credit. She kept his jacket. She clearly wants to get it back to him, and that is nice of her. But anyways, no. Chris, I'm gonna throw it to you. What's your initial response to
the very
video?
fact that she dropped the handcuffs, I'm kind of like that was my thing. I was like, I had actually forgotten that. In all fairness, so people know, I mean, I have seen these videos, but I kind of forgot about the handcuff thing for whatever reason. But anyway, I mean, again, it's a physical situation. I mean, there are going to be women who can do this job and do it well. I have no doubt about that. But my concern is, and I'm going to probably bring it up again, is that the reason that guy got away is because probably some standard was lowered so that these two women... Could you roll it back so we could see the police officers again, Kevin? Is that possible?
Absolutely. Where we're... Yeah, so here we go.
Yeah, so these, at least one of them looks fairly overweight, too. So that's also kind of an interesting thing. I mean, not that I haven't seen overweight male cops or whatever,
yeah.
but yeah, right. But still, looking at this, I just don't feel that we're putting our best people out there. Period.
Mm. And I'm gonna be honest. So, all right, my initial take on this is first I look at first I look at the female officers, right, and then I look at the assailant, the guy they're trying to arrest. All right, now these are not twig women. Now that's not me calling them fat. They are stockier women, and I'll use that phrasing because, well, I feel that's actually a compliment. These are stockier women. These are not, women who are going to be blown over by, a breeze, right? Now, this man, on the other hand, look at his legs. Look at his arms. This is a twig of a man. I swear my 7-year-old godson might be able to pick him up and toss him for a bit, I mean, I'm just saying, might be able to just toss him across the road. However, that means these two fairly stocky women could not handle this twig of a man right here. Now that's concerning for me, right? And then furthermore, when we look at this situation, I honestly, to their credit, I don't think they were trained properly, or they just didn't absorb the training properly. Because clearly there's a great deal here that just makes you kind of concerned, right? Like the way she tries to kick his leg during it, obviously the dropping of the handcuffs, like overall, I feel like whoever trained these women also wasn't the best at training them, to be honest. Just observing their approach and their techniques at subduing this man. So I'm just gonna go there. Is that I don't think that there's the training involved, but also the fact that I think this highlights the very real difference between men and women. Because here's my greater concern: what if this wasn't a twig boy who was trying to get away, right? What if this wasn't like a man who's like maybe 97 pounds soaking wet? What if this was a 6'5", 270-pound built man, and these were the two women trying to arrest him? Now I've seen.
Yeah,
now I have seen.
It wouldn't have happened.
I've seen male police officers on several occasions struggle to deal with that in that situation, right? I've seen where it's that type of assailant, and there are 3 to 4 male officers that can barely contain that. And that's 3 to 4 male officers, and we're expecting these 2 women right here to possibly handle that. I honestly feel they were fortunate in this right here. They were fortunate that they got a twig boy. And all he wanted to do was get away. He didn't fight. He just wanted to get away.
Yep.
So,
because they could have been put in a very dangerous situation, because if it was the type of guy that you were describing, they could have, I mean, quite frankly, honestly, been killed, and so yeah, they were lucky that they got the little twig boy, because they aren't particularly tall women, and you were maybe a little bit nicer about it. I said one looked like she was actually kind of overweight, but I mean, I don't know. Well, we'll go on. We'll talk more at length, I know.
Yeah.
So I won't keep going right now.
Well, I mean, here's where we do get to the general conversation, right? Because this was the final clip. Like I said, I left this one for last because there is more context I do feel that's needed here to a degree, such as their training. But honestly, it is also very telling. Vinny in the comments actually said that he has seen this one. And he's talking about in general how, he's watched 2 male officers struggle to tackle child predator during arrest. And that's that highlights it right there, right? We've seen grown men, even fit male officers, struggle to, apprehend and restrain a suspect.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, Kevin. Now that we're kind of moving into the more general conversation, here's the thing that I want to say to everyone who is watching this. I'm not saying it's impossible, and I think that I've kind of alluded to this, but I'm not saying that it's impossible for women to do these jobs. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that the vast majority of women probably cannot effectively, and that is the key word there, effectively do these jobs. So, therefore, when the DEI advocates are looking at the numbers of women on a police force, or the DEI advocates are looking at the number of women on a fire department, I think that just given the natural differences between men and women, there's obviously, in these types of jobs, almost always going to be fewer women. And I think that we should just be okay with that. We need to be okay with the fact that there are differences between men and women. Because you know what? There's jobs out there that women are better at than men. And so the simple fact is like, let's just acknowledge that there is a difference between the two sexes. It's okay to acknowledge that. It doesn't mean that one is inferior to the other. That's not what we're talking about here. Because of course I don't think women are inferior. I mean, hell, there's a shit ton of very intelligent women out there that are a lot smarter than me. So, I mean, I'm inferior to them, but the thing is when it does come to physical strength, and this goes to the military too, I thought that it was like so interesting that everybody, lost their minds over some stuff that Pete Hegseth allegedly said about women on the front lines and stuff like that. Do I think that in general we should be using a DEI concept for who is at the front lines of our wars? Hell no. I mean, I want the most rugged, tough men up there. And if there is a rugged, tough woman that can play with the boys, so to speak, fine. I'm not saying that that's entirely impossible, but here's the key, Kevin. There need to be standards in place that make sure that anyone, and they shouldn't be dumbed down in order to make sure that we can accommodate women or whoever we're trying to accommodate. There just need to be standards for a job. And especially when it comes to the police, firefighters, paramedics, people in the military. I want those to be super, super high standards in order for people to get in there. And like I said, some women will actually meet those standards, but not generally speaking, these are jobs that are mostly suited for men. And I just don't think there's any doubting that.
And, Chris, as stated in the comments here, Vinny said, we know you're not sexist, Chris. We just know the stats. And also, Patriot Government TV says, sup, buddies. How you doing, man? And on Facebook, in response to this clip, we have Pamela, who said, thank God she did not drop her gun, which absolutely, and I think that goes in line with thank God that this man just wanted to get away. He was not up for a fight. Right. Now, so I might be considered a little bit more of a strict perspective on this. where you might be able to get me to give a bit is if the standards weren't lowered at all, right?
Right.
We'll do a stream eventually where we'll go into the military standards and how they actually did change them in regards to like how many push-ups a man needs to do versus a woman, right? How many lifts, how many pole, all that stuff is actually different. For how long a man needs to run is different than how long a woman needs to run. Right? Now, if you were to say that there was this set standard that was the standard for men to reach, and there were some women who managed to reach that standard, all right, you'd probably be able to convince me. But unfortunately, that's not where we are in our culture. Right? That's not where we are. We know the standards aren't kept the same, and we know the standards have been lowered for both men and women. There's a video clip that sometime I'll show you, Chris. It shows two young men, of probably in their 20s, trying to do the exercises to get into the military, to qualify for the military from like the 1940s, 1950s, and they just can't do it. And these aren't unfit men, So overall, we have lowered our standards. Now, in this specific situation, another thing that concerns me here when I'm looking at these two women and this guy, right? If you have a situation like this, I feel that you increase the risk of the officer going for their gun. The gun for a woman is the equalizer. That's just a fact. And it's one of the reasons I'm so pro Second Amendment, is that for women, owning a gun is the equalizer when a man is physically assaulting them. Sure. This right here, we see that situation. If this was a 6'5" muscle-bound man, there is a greater chance, even if these were male officers, that a gun would be pulled. And with women, I think there's even a greater chance that a gun would be pulled in that scenario. So I actually see this, women in the police force, I see over time that we're probably going to see a correlation of an increase in officers pulling their guns and shooting the perpetrators.
That's interesting, Kevin. I mean, I had never really thought about that before, but it is true. I mean, the gun is kind of the equalizer in many situations for many different types of people. I'd never really thought about that before. That's kind of an interesting one. I mean, I think that's definitely a fair argument. I'm not sure what I think about it, just because I'm kind of just being exposed to that concept now for the first time. Yeah, I mean, I could see that, and I'll be quite honest, it did cross my mind, given what, not what you said, because at the time I hadn't heard it, but it did cross my mind. I wonder why they didn't reach for their guns. In order to at least threaten him, not necessarily shoot him, but at least threaten him and possibly get him to acquiesce to being arrested or whatever. But so I am kind of surprised at their restraint there. So I mean, I guess kudos to them. I mean, I'm assuming this guy wasn't some like truly violent offender or whatever. But I think what you were saying about standards being dumbed down so that we can be supposedly more inclusive. And I don't think that is actually inclusion. It's just stupid leftist
It's
bullshit.
Dangerous.
Yeah, it's just stupid leftist, dangerous bullshit, really. Yes. And, I'll go back to what I said. I mean, I want these folks to have the highest standards possible. I mean, obviously within reason, but the highest standards possibly put upon them, because they're going to be in extremely dangerous situations. I mean, are we going to send, homemaker mothers out to war or something? You know what I'm saying? It's like, it just feels like these folks are so interested in the supposed inclusion that they're also kind of forgetting that they're putting these people in extreme danger too.
So, Chris, you actually touched on something there. So, there are individuals that have a perspective, and mind you, these are also even individuals who are obviously much more traditional in regards to gender norms as well, in relation to what we're discussing here. And they would argue that even if a woman does meet the standard that has been set for a man, that she should still not be doing this type of job or be in the military or be a firefighter. Because from their perspective, they consider it a sign of a sick nation if a nation is sending their women out to die.
That is interesting, Kevin. As I'm sure you're not surprised, I disagree with that viewpoint. And guys, don't worry, I'm not some huge leftist. That's not the case. Kevin and I are both conservative, but that is not, if I let me put it this way. If I'm going to be intellectually honest and true to myself and what I actually believe in, then I'm going to have to say that I just care that the person can meet the standards. I don't care about inclusion. So therefore, if they are high standards and they're standards that we can all agree on are good standards for these people to meet to get into these types of jobs, then I don't care who ends up in those jobs. That doesn't bother me, because to me, if I'm going to take that sort of like socially conservative route and say, oh, well, women just can't do these sorts of things because they're women and it shows some sort of sign of weakness, or it's a depraved nation because we're doing this sort of stuff. I mean, then you're getting into a matter of opinion and stuff like that. That's not factual based stuff. And I just don't honestly care to even engage in that sort of stuff. I just want to say, let's set some standards, high standards. And guess what? I'll be the first to admit that in the military, in police departments, paramedics, firefighters, there will never, ever, as long as we have higher standards, be as many women in those jobs.
Oh, absolutely.
And that is just because I'm acknowledging that there is a difference between the sexes. But, while I can kind of appreciate to a certain degree, because I do try to keep an open mind, that sort of socially conservative idea that women shouldn't necessarily be the protectors in that sort of sense, I just don't think it's a smart political move, because, like I said, it's a matter of opinion. It's not based in fact. It's just, I don't think women should be able to do this. Well, what kind of law are you going to base on that?
Well, I mean, overall, right? I mean, when people say, do we have laws that apply to one sex? I mean, we absolutely do, right? Currently, we have the draft. But I want to turn quickly to Vinny in the comments. Again, thank you, Vinny, for watching and contributing. He says, we might eventually have the homemaker women in combat if we go to war with Russia. Hopefully it doesn't happen. Now, here's the funny thing with that. Mind you, I know I've never been to Russia, and I know I'm going off images, but I feel like the average woman in Russia, I feel like the standards just of being an average woman in Russia are higher than our standards for a woman entering the military in America. Have you ever seen that viral picture of the grandmother-looking woman carrying a log that's her height out of Russia?
Yes,
right?
Yes, I've seen that.
This woman, right? So, heck, Russian women are a whole different category. And, so I just wanted to comment on that quick. But seriously, though, I think we did see We have a great example, though, of standards being low, right? It just so happens in this scenario in these circumstances I'm gonna bring up, this situation where it was a woman that we saw this very much reflected on. Obviously, when there was the attempt on Trump's life, right? One of the agents in charge of protecting him was this short, thicker woman who struggled with her gun and wasn't even tall enough to cover Donald Trump, right? So first of all, because Trump's like, well, I think he's 6'2", 6'3", right?
He's 6'4", 6'4", if I remember.
6'4".
Mm-hmm.
So he's 6'4", and then Barrett, well, that's a whole different animal altogether.
Yeah, he's like 8 or 9
he's like
feet tall.
7 something. Yeah, I know, right? And continuing to grow, it seems.
All right.
And this woman she couldn't cover him even if she tried. So to be fair, I wouldn't even want a man who was 5'7" or 5'8" to be guarding a man who's 6'4".
No,
I don't
well,
like that sounds insane.
And that's where you're being fair, Kevin. Because we're also acknowledging that with the high standards, there's going to be lots of men that can never get into these jobs. And that's fine too, because we want the best of the best.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're, I think that honestly, when it gets down to it, that's what you and I are both arguing for. We want the best of the best. Occasionally, Is that going to be a woman? Probably so. But in these jobs that we've been talking about, most of the time it's not going to be a woman, And I think that's totally fair. I don't know why our society got to this point where, there's this idea that we all have to be totally equal, because we're not. You may be smarter than me. I may be more physically fit than you. Whatever the case may be, there's going to be differences between us, and we're not going to be able to do all the same things. Plain and simple.
And I think, though, part of the acknowledging the reality, right, is, as I talked earlier with that one woman who was carrying the man, right, she's fit. Mm-hmm. She could probably outrun me, especially I'm asthmatic, all that stuff, like the respect's there. But if you were to take a woman who had the same health conditions I do, who had the same level of activity as me, who, all other aspects of our lives were the same, except I'm a man and she's a woman, just by the nature of me being a man, I would be stronger than her. So if we lived the same lifestyle,
right.
We were the same height, similar weight. Mind you, men and women carry their weight differently, and muscle mass and everything's different. But if in similar lifestyle, just by virtue of me being a man, I would be stronger than her.
Well, and these people forget that it's not even like muscle mass and all that type of stuff. Men have larger hearts. We have larger lungs. We're able to deal with energy consumption in a way that women are just simply not even capable of doing, or at least the vast majority of women. Let's put it that way, because there's always exceptions, and I'm fine with acknowledging those exceptions. That's perfectly fine. But for the most part, that is it. That's why we get in this whole thing about, these so-called these trans-identifying males getting into female sports, because they, by nature of going through male puberty, have a bigger heart, the bigger lungs, probably more muscle mass. And we have seen that even if they go on estrogen, it still doesn't reduce their muscle mass to any degree that is significant enough to, put them on the same level as women. And even if you give them estrogen, it still doesn't change the size of their heart or their lungs. That doesn't change at all. So, even if their muscle mass might not be as great because they're taking estrogen, they still will have an advantage over every woman, so it is kind of interesting how there is this kind of like divide among the left and the right, but at the same time, we're also seeing a lot of leftists and right wing people come together over some of these issues. But here's the funny thing. I bet you anything that if any of my left-leaning friends are watching this video, they're probably super pissed at me right now. But they'll also probably be the first ones to sit there and say that trans-identified males don't belong in female sports. The funny thing is, it's the same reason. And they're not understanding that. It's because
it's that cognitive dissonance, absolutely.
Yeah, it's the exact same reason, because all we are doing is acknowledging that there's a difference between the sexes.
Speaking of that, though,
they'll
Chris,
acknowledge it in one instance, but we're acknowledging it in both situations.
Absolutely. Now, Chris, speaking of that, I want to reference Vinny here in the comments, because I think, I don't know, I feel like he has like a psychic connection this evening, because he brought up a comment that I actually was thinking about bringing up in a moment. He goes, I want to play devil's advocate, Chris. We have the argument that women are stronger because of how they give birth, the pain it takes for that. Now, in general, it is true. In general, women have a stronger tolerance for pain. That's true. But that does not translate to physical strength in regards to being able to lift someone up, right? That does not translate into physical strength in regarding to be able to knock someone out with a punch. It doesn't translate in that fashion. It just means that women, God bless them, because they are the sex that gives birth, they have a higher tolerance for pain. And that I respect that. I'll acknowledge that straight up, right? We've all probably seen videos of men putting on the little, the pads, that simulate pregnancy, labor, right? And the women, when they have it at the same level, they're just like, and the men are like rolling over in pain. So I will acknowledge that. Absolutely. Women, because of what because of their anatomy, because of the purpose of womanhood, which I'm going to get hate for that. That is one of the purposes of womanhood, to carry and deliver children, just as part of purpose generally of a man, at least is why whether you believe in God created us or we evolved, was to produce the sperm, right? And stuff like that, and to be physically stronger and to protect our families, right? Women have that higher tolerance for pain for that reason. But like I said, I don't see where that translates to like an arm wrestling contest. I'm sorry. Higher pain tolerance, yes. Acknowledge that fully. Does that mean greater strength? No, that does not.
I actually like I like Vinny playing that devil's advocate though. That does make a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
And Vinny and anyone else who is actually replying to us, unfortunately, we're not set up in a situation where I can see things, so that's why Kevin's having to read everything to me. But anyway, I mean, the thing is while that doesn't necessarily translate into strength, it just means that by virtue that they have that ability, then that means they're probably good at something that men aren't good at. And that's cool. Again, all we're doing is just acknowledging that the sexes are different. And that's it. So I mean, while I appreciate that, I also agree with you, Kevin. A higher pain tolerance doesn't translate into strength. But that higher pain tolerance may mean that they're better at something else, than we would be, as men. Of course, there's the joke, the man flu. I mean, men are pussies when it comes to being sick. Women do push through it better. That is for sure.
Oh. Sorry, you just made me think of a clip that I wish I had taken the clip for this, because I saw it today. It's where a man is sitting there recording himself, right? And his wife is sitting behind him. She had just done a home birth, without drugs or anything like that, right? No epidurals, nothing like that. This woman had
Holy
just
shit.
given birth, right?
That girl's
And
serious.
it's a home birth too, so it's a home birth, right? He's sitting in the chair, she's laying on the bed, and he goes, I gotta say, she went through this today, right? She went through ordeal. She gave birth without an epidural at home. And he goes on to how long the birth was and stuff. And he goes, and now she honestly can say that she knows how I felt a few weeks ago when I had a cold. And it was, and all the comments were like, have they found his body yet?
Oh my God, I have not seen that.
No jury in the land will convict her. Will convict this woman.
Oh no, I wouldn't. I'd be like, yeah, you need to strangle your husband.
But I mean, I will admit, there is nothing probably more annoying or more whining than a man who's sick. I'll be fully honest. You know, in general, women tend to be better at handling that.
The only, you know, and this is where maybe I can have some sympathy for women when it comes to this. Here's the funny thing, Kevin. Through most of my life, I was the typical whiny man every time I got sick. But as you know, I did develop cancer. And I went through some extremely painful procedures. And I learned that the man flu is stupid. And after I went through those painful things, here's the funny thing is, it did change me. Because recently, as you know, when you came and visited me, Nathan and I had been sick and all that type of stuff. Nathan could not lift his ass out of bed. I was up bouncing around and doing everything. And even though I was sick as a dog. And so the thing is, you know, I mean, I was a man that was exposed to great pain, so it definitely raised my tolerance for that sort of stuff. But most men aren't that, don't go through that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But nearly every woman does. I mean, they have to deal with fucking periods, you know, possibly like really bad cramps and all this type of shit that men never have to deal with.
Yeah, and so because I quickly want to acknowledge some comments quick just before, because we're getting near the hour. Plus, sure. Chris, excuse me, I think you'll find this amusing. Pamela on Facebook. These are two comments from her. One is, being honest, when you state, do you hear her roar? Yes, when you birth a baby with no epidural, which we just discussed. And then Pamela also went on to comment. My husband was a tough guy. You would have laughed your ass off seeing him when I tried taking a sliver out of his finger. He always got tears in his eyes. He said I was trying to kill him. Now, I can believe that wholeheartedly. So this highlights, right, is the very big differences between men and women. And here's the thing is that when it comes to creating a strong man, I believe a strong mother is just as important as a strong father, right? I believe that both are important because they teach different things to their children. But in regards to men and women and performance, there was a study, I think it was back in 2014, and if I'm correct, I think it was the Marines. It covered 400 soldiers. 100 of them were women, so 25%, and it studied how they performed in units. And overall, the mixed sexed units performed worse than the male only units for various reasons. Obviously, there was handling of equipment, so that required the physical strength. And overall, then there's just personalities, which men and women have different personalities. That's just the fact. And I'll say this from working in a warehouse. I worked in a warehouse and I met women who did incredibly well in these environments. But do you know what the key was to these women doing incredibly well? When they came into that environment, they didn't try to make it a more female environment. They became they basically embraced being one of the boys to a degree, right? Some of them were
Sure.
became cruder than some of the guys. And
That's funny.
that is at the end, though, I think a major part of the difference is the personalities too. So we think about the physical components of it, right? We think about women in general being weaker than men. And but what we also have to realize and focus on is that there's different personalities. A man is more likely to not put as much emotion into considering a course of action as a woman is, right?
Yeah, that's probably true.
In general, yeah. I'll say so. And then this is one of the last points I want to make, since we're all getting close to an hour. Obviously, because of what happened with Trump and that one woman who was, I think she was an Episcopalian or something. I forget.
Oh, are you talking about the bishop?
Yeah, the bishop. Sorry, the bishop.
Yes,
right?
She's Episcopalian.
Yeah. Episcopalian, right? So that has created a greater discussion among people regarding should women have the priesthood or be religious leaders, right? And here's the interesting thing from a historical perspective when you look at this. I honestly think one of the reasons why in a number of faiths they were more restrictive of women being religious leaders is because women in general, I know there's exceptions, so don't comment with your second cousin twice removed who defeats this, what I'm about to say. I'm talking about in general. Women are going to be more sympathetic and emotional positions, right? And I think in faith, this is the thing. Men are going to be less sympathetic to emotional arguments against a certain scripture than women are. So a man is less likely to bend scripture to fit the needs of the individual, where a woman, because she has that sympathetic nature, she's going to be more likely to bend scripture to meet the needs of that individual that she feels sympathy for.
That is actually kind of an interesting point, I will say. So here's kind of the funny thing. So guys, for those of you who don't know, I'm ethnically Jewish. I also practice Judaism as well. So Kevin's a Christian, I'm a Jew. Cool, whatever. Anyway, one of the things, though, that I did as a younger person is I went to St. Louis University. St. Louis University is a Catholic university. And I, did have some liberal female professors there. Yes, they do exist in Catholic universities as well. And when it came to the issue of homosexuality, if there was ever reason for that to come up, and granted, it wasn't very often, and it's not like I wore it on my sleeve or anything like that. But, if there was a reason for it to come up, especially like, say, in a theology class or something like that, the female argument was always very emotionally based. As opposed to being scripturally sound, and I'm talking about this from a Jewish and Christian tradition, because I am one of those Jews that actually knows Christianity and Judaism pretty well. When I talked to a theologian about it, I didn't like the answer that I was getting from the female professors that I talked to. So it just to draw it back just a little bit, guys. What was happening is at this time I was very confused about my homosexuality, in the sense that I wasn't confused that I was gay. I knew I was gay, but I wondered where God stood with me. And anyway, so I didn't go shopping for the right answer. I listened to everybody. But I found a lot more comfort when I talked to a male theologian who did admit that, he didn't agree with the church's stances on homosexuality. And then, of course, my interest was piqued. I'm kind of like, why? And so he talked about it, but he presented a very interesting historical argument, talking about the conditions of society at that time and what was going on, especially as far as temple prostitution, which often involved male prostitution, and those sorts
So
of
he
things.
didn't just say God loves, right? Because
No.
that's generally what you would have probably gotten from. I know I might be stereotyping here for some people, but that's generally what you would have gotten from a woman.
That is what I got.
Exactly.
That is what I got.
God loves.
Right.
Right.
And that wasn't good. That wasn't good enough for me because I know God loves me. But I also know that there's this other stuff in the Bible that says he's not so wild about something dealing with homosexuality, at least. Well, the theologian gave, like I said, gave me this very well-reasoned argument about, that essentially from his point of view, and this did calm my nerves, made me feel better. From his point of view, he was essentially saying, Chris, the Bible is not talking about a homosexual like you. You're just a person who's attracted to someone of the same sex who wants to be in a nice, monogamous, long-term relationship, that sort of thing. He was like, it's not talking about people like you. It's talking about something else. And that made me feel better. But that God loves me or God loves shit, I mean, I guess, again, that kind of goes back to the difference between males and females. That might have made a woman feel good, but at me as a man, that did nothing for me.
I think it's because also as men, not all men, but also as men, I feel like on some primal level, we want to be challenged. We need to, in order for something to feel truly earned, we feel that we need to have conquered it or we need to have earned it, right? Not just had someone hand it to us on a platter. And I think that even translates when it comes to faith, which I don't want us diving in fully because we are at the hour mark into a faith discussion because we'll be here forever with that. But in the future, I think that's one that we definitely will pick up and even bring someone or even two people on who are religious leaders to talk about that topic, because I think that's a topic that definitely is worth a deeper conversation that we just don't have time for this evening. But with that in mind, I do want to reference one more comment by Vinny because I have a response to it, and I think it will help us wrap this up. Vinny goes, that priest lady was bold, though, at the inauguration. She truly believed Trump is a fascist dictator. In her mind, she was making a speech of no return. All right, I'm going to disagree with that in her mind, she was making a speech of no return. And here's why. Because I 100%, I would bet every penny that I have to my name, I would bet that woman would not make that speech in Palestine right now, in the Gaza Strip. I promise you she wouldn't, because that truly is a place where she would not return from. That would be a speech.
She'd be assassinated.
if she gave that same speech in a number of places in the Middle East, for example, that truly would be a speech of no return. So I'm going to challenge you on that, Vinny. I don't think that she honestly felt that, because if she truly believed that she was giving a speech before a fascist, before Hitler reincarnated, no, this woman, I don't see any bravery in this woman. Because where has she gone outside of her comfort zone? She's doing interviews. She was in a public setting in Washington, D.C., in an area that primarily supports her and her perspective. I don't see what she had to put at risk, what she had to lose. So I don't think she was brave at all. I think she was opportunistic. She knows that she's in Washington, D.C., a liberal city, that she's in a liberal church, and that the media, the mainstream media, will favor her. So All that she knew, and that's why she made that speech. It had nothing to do with no coming back from it. She knew she'd not only come back from it, she knew that people would celebrate her for it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I would love for her to have tried that speech in the Middle East, in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip. I guarantee you she wouldn't have done it.
No, it wouldn't have happened, for sure. You know, and you know, the thing is when I heard her speak, and I'll wrap this up pretty quickly. But when I heard her speak, she said, you know, trans, gays, maybe she included lesbians. I can't remember, as being, you know, afraid of Trump. You know, when I hear that stuff, I'm like, bullshit. This is not about gays and lesbians at all. All you're really concerned about are the trans people, and that is it. You know, and so I mean that kind of like gives her away to me immediately, because let's face it, none of these leftists really give a damn about gays and lesbians anymore. The trans thing is their favorite cause, you know, and so anytime that they include us in that, and I have to immediately call bullshit. I'm just like, no.
Absolutely.
I know that you're not really talking about me. You're actually just talking about the trans thing. You just want to include the gays because you know that we have a higher level of acceptance in this country than these weirdos that you're trying to promote.
Riding those coattails.
Exactly. So anyway, I'll shut up now.
No, absolutely. So with that, people, we're at just over an hour. We didn't plan to go for that long, but I think we both knew we'd go for that long. So this was our first episode of KC Reacts. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, share, especially share with people you know who might be interested in our content, because we do plan to make this a weekly thing. And also, please message us with content ideas, especially if there's a video out there that you'd like to see Chris and I respond to. Let us know.
Oh yeah, and let me throw that out there, guys. So for any of you who don't know, I go by Midwest Homo 77 on X. You can find me on Facebook. I have a completely public account. Just look for Chris Barrett. I think I'm actually the top search results on Facebook. If you just search for Chris Barrett, maybe throw in Kansas City or something like that, because that's where I live. But anyway, so I just wanted to throw that out there, Kevin, so that people knew if they wanted to reach out to me or you. That's kind of a good way to contact me.
Which we'll definitely in the future, in all of our videos, once we get a chance to update them, to edit them, we'll put in the descriptions the best way to contact each of us. So please feel free to reach out, because we'd love to hear from you. And heck, if you have an interesting position, maybe we'll even have you on as a guest, and we can actually have that conversation live. With that, thank you all for watching our first episode. We greatly appreciate you. God bless. Have a great evening. And with that, we will catch you next time. Good night, everyone.